This review has been sat in my audio for quite a while unused, so apologies that it's a bit late. I thought you guys might still enjoy it. Welcome back to SwitchUp, my name's Mark Walker, and today we're going to look at the interesting looking Dreamscaper. We're a very small, what I'd refer to as an indie review channel. I just had to get a review of Dreamscaper out there. I've been playing it on and off for a couple of weeks now since it came out, and I just can't shake the Binding of Isaac vibes that it gives me, whilst managing to do quite a lot of the things that made Hades very good. Yes, it's a roguelite, but it does things quite differently to any that I've played so far. A big thanks to the developers and publisher for the review copy. Remember, if you enjoyed the content, do stick around, make sure your notifications are on. We give away a free game each and every month to the person most active. Is it a dream come true, or perhaps one you're going to want to escape? Well, let's find out. As the title suggests, the game takes place within dreams and the real world. Cassidy's nightmares form the roguelite stages, whilst when waking, the narrative is delivered through different characters that she meets. Through her restless slumbers, you'll discover the fears and anxieties which have been plaguing her, with them cleverly taking the form of the game's boss enemies. The levels themselves are formed of her own memories, and at certain stages you'll be given a little more exposition into the meanings behind some of these. It's a very cool concept, and it's a nice way of tying everything together. There's been a few roguelites now that seem to have hooked on to this idea of combining an ever-expanding story through your different playthroughs. It's a really smart way of making those constant playthroughs still carry a sense of achievement for the player. As far as gameplay and controls go then, this is split into two different segments. The roguelite element takes the form of a lucid dream, and this is divided into several stages which encapsulate different memories. In these areas, it's all about making tactical decisions based on the weapons and gear you've got. There are a number of unique weapons that can be found, as well as different items to aid your run through. What's very cool is that once you've discovered them, you'll then have to sketch them when you're awake, and then they become a thing that reoccurs within your lucid dreams. I mentioned Isaac at the beginning of this review for a very clear reason. Some of the core gameplay mechanics here are almost identical, and that is most certainly a good thing. Take for example the map, which is shown over here. Small symbols will indicate what's available in the next area. Things like shops, crystals which carry loot, as well as the boss area will all be denoted on here. But something I loved was the ability to fast travel between any place you've previously visited. Where Dreamscaper differs quite drastically from the aforementioned title is in its combat. Firstly, your moves will be weapon dependent, with more than a few nods to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is awesome. But there's the almost quintessential dodge move, parrying, and a ranged class here as well. But what Dreamscaper does really well is the timing. So many of these games don't get their timing right, in that it makes the player almost feel like they're guessing when they're trying to parry or counter a move, but not so the case with Dreamscaper. There's a good window of timing to allow parrying with melee moves, but also some nice little touches, like the turrets showing exactly how many they're going to fire before there's a small gap. At the end of each area, you're going to find, as you'd expect, a boss, each of these being based on an emotional feeling. They're very fairly designed, decently challenging, but I was pleased to see the developers include an option to allow the player to skip them once they'd beaten them once. And here's why. If you choose to do that, it will actually punish you in terms of rewards. It won't give you the rewards you'd normally receive. But that being said, once you've done them 4 or 5 or 6 times, you may just want to skip on and move to the next area. Having that risk-reward choice was a nice addition. The final tool Cassidy has in her arsenal are what's known as lucid powers. These can range from a huge freezing shockwave to giant screen-clearing blasts. They're very fun moves to use. They have a cooldown, which is shown at the bottom of the screen, but they can be game-changing in difficult combat. And finally, Cassidy's ability to plant bombs had my inner Bomberman senses tingling. It just takes nice elements from lots of different games and does them very well. When your run comes to an end, you aren't simply greeted with a game over screen. Cassidy will awake from her lucid dream in the real world. From here, there's a whole town that's gradually unlocked. This includes several different areas, places like the park, a coffee shop, or maybe the library, each of them containing different characters. Now back at home, Cassidy begins to learn skills like creating different gifts that she can then give to these players, thus building their relationship bond. As the bond grows higher, the exposition is delivered to the player, and through the nurturing of these relationships, you can unlock permanent buffs that can be applied to the player. I wish there was a multiplayer here. It's the perfect setup for it, but it absolutely nails that one more more compulsive gameplay that you'll find in something like Hades. The story isn't as strong as that game, but I liked the original idea of having that overworld area and the stark shift to the more familiar roguelite setting. It's the back and forth between these two areas and the constant unlocks that they apply to each other that made me want to carry on. And to avoid what could otherwise become very repetitive, it's through this back and forth that you'll gradually unlock new elements for the stages you've already visited. Things like puzzle areas, different gear and weapons in the shops, and a host of other little secrets that I'll let you discover. It's all tied together with sensible low latency controls and was just a whole lot of fun to play. As far as criticisms go, they're quite standard for the genre. There can be a small amount of frustration, the enemy variety isn't quite as good as it could have been, and some of the weapons just seem a little unbalanced. Still, I think for fans of the genre, there's more than enough for you here, and I've had a great time playing through. Overall, I give gameplay 16 out of 20. While I like the overworld areas, they didn't feel quite as coherent a setup as the roguelite elements. The controls are good, they also score 16 out of 20. Visually speaking, Dreamscaper looks quite nice. It uses a fully 3D system with a fixed isometric camera. On the Nintendo Switch version at least, things take a little bit of a hit graphically speaking, with a drop in resolution and some slightly heavier handed anti-aliasing causing a touch of blur on the image. To its credit, it performs well in both docked and handheld, with some really quite attractive looking areas. I've mentioned some of the enemy varieties being lacking, and some of the overworld locations can feel a little lifeless, but where the meat of the game is also where it looks its best. Some stages have reflective surfaces, real-time shadows, and there's a contrast between each one. Dreamscaper has a beautifully melodic soundtrack that fits the aesthetic perfectly. My only minor gripe with it is that sometimes the audio and on-screen action could feel a little bit disjointed, but still let the music speak for itself. Overall, I give visuals and performance 16 out of 20. Audio scores 18 out of 20. Dreamscaper is going to set you back £18.99 or your regional equivalent, and as with many roguelite titles, it can be finished in quite a quick time depending on how good you are. You're looking at around about 5 hours on average to complete this one, although if you want to find all of the secrets and extras, that can stretch up to around 10. I really enjoy the game, and it pits itself in terms of price alongside Hades, which is a slightly more expensive £22, but I would argue has more to offer. That being said, Dreamscaper's a unique and well polished experience for the most part, and I do think it offers decent value for money, and with a 4 gig download, it's not going to take up too much of your space. Overall, I give value 16 out of 20. Dreamscaper is a really good roguelike game. It's certainly going to appeal to fans of the genre. It doesn't do everything perfectly, but it does it well enough. It has a lovely soundtrack and a striking visual style. It gets a SwitchUp score of 82%. Let me know if you already picked this one up. It's quite a late review, but I wanted to cover it. I think it's worth it. And a big thanks to all of you who enjoy and watch the channel. Thanks if you're a patron. You are awesome. Remember, we have a messaging function on there. If you ever want to hit us up with a message, we'll reply directly to you. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!